In the vast expanse of human experience, one truth remains constant. The weight we carry within ourselves often determines the quality of our lives. These burdens are not always physical. They manifest in the form of regrets, fears, desires, and attachments. The teachings of the Buddha offer profound wisdom on the art of letting go, a practice that is both liberating and transformative. But letting go is not about giving up. It is about creating space for peace, clarity, and genuine happiness. Hiroshi, a young seeker burdened by the pressures of societal expectations and personal failures, once sought the guidance of Master Hotaka, a wise monk who lived in a secluded monastery nestled in the mountains. "Master," Hiroshi asked one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, "why do I feel so heavy, even when my life seems filled with abundance?" Master Hotaka looked at him with kind eyes and said, "Because, Hiroshi, your hands are full of things you do not need, and your heart is clinging to what no longer serves you. To find peace, you must learn to let go." The words lingered in Hiroshi's mind as he began his journey into understanding the art of letting go. Along the way, he discovered that there were many forms of attachment, to material possessions, to past mistakes, to future anxieties, and even to the opinions of others. Each attachment acted like a chain, tethering him to a cycle of dissatisfaction and inner turmoil. Take, for example, Hiroshi's attachment to material wealth. For years, he believed that happiness could be measured in possessions, a bigger house, a faster car, a fatter wallet. But no matter how much he acquired, the emptiness within him remained. One day, while visiting a humble farmer named Kinji, Hiroshi observed something remarkable. Kinji owned very little: a modest home, a small plot of land, and a few tools for farming. Yet, he radiated a contentment that Hiroshi had never seen before. "Kinji," Hiroshi asked, "why are you so content with so little?" Kinji smiled and replied, "Because what I have is enough. I do not carry the burden of wanting more. My heart is light, and my days are simple." In that moment, Hiroshi realized that his relentless pursuit of more had prevented him from appreciating what he already had. The weight of his desires had clouded his ability to experience gratitude. But material attachment is only one form of burden. The past, with its lingering regrets and unresolved pain, can be just as heavy. Hiroshi carried deep regrets from his youth. Words spoken in anger, opportunities missed, friendships broken. These regrets played in his mind like a broken record, preventing him from living fully in the present. One day, Master Hotaka handed Hiroshi a small stone and said, "Carry this stone with you everywhere you go." Hiroshi did as he was told, but over time, the stone became a nuisance, a constant weight in his pocket, a source of discomfort. After a week, Hiroshi returned to Master Hotaka and said, "Master, this stone is heavy and serves no purpose. May I let it go?" Master Hotaka nodded. "Do you see now, Hiroshi? Regrets are like this stone. You carry them with you, allowing them to weigh you down, even though you have the power to set them down at any moment." With tears in his eyes, Hiroshi released the stone into a nearby stream, watching as it disappeared beneath the water. For the first time in years, he felt a lightness in his chest. Similarly, Hiroshi discovered the paralyzing effect of worrying about the future. The endless what-ifs and worst-case scenarios robbed him of peace and clarity. He realized that his fear of the future was nothing more than a projection of his mind, an illusion that had no real substance. Master Hotaka shared a story with Hiroshi about a man who spent his entire life building a boat, preparing for a flood that never came. When he died, the boat remained unfinished, and the man had never once enjoyed the calm waters of the lake nearby. "The future is like that flood," Master Hotaka explained. "We spend so much time preparing for what might happen that we forget to live in what is happening." Hiroshi began practicing mindfulness, bringing his attention back to the present moment whenever his mind wandered into the future. Slowly, he realized that the present was the only space where peace could truly exist. But among all forms of attachment, Hiroshi found that the hardest to release was his need for approval from others. From a young age, he had been conditioned to seek validation, to measure his worth through the eyes of others. Every compliment felt like a fleeting moment of joy, while every criticism felt like a dagger to his heart. One day, while meditating by a serene pond, Hiroshi observed a small leaf floating on the water. The leaf drifted wherever the wind blew, without resistance or fear. "Why can I not be like this leaf?" Hiroshi wondered aloud. Master Hotaka, who had been observing him, replied, "Because, Hiroshi, you have given others the power to dictate your direction. Let go of their opinions, and you will find your true path." Over time, Hiroshi learned to find validation within himself, to trust his own heart, and to walk his path with confidence, regardless of external praise or criticism. Letting go is not a one-time act, but a continuous practice. Each day, Hiroshi reminded himself to release what no longer served him, to let go of possessions that cluttered his space, regrets that haunted his mind, fears that clouded his vision, and the need for approval that bound his spirit. Through his journey, Hiroshi discovered that letting go was not about losing. It was about gaining. By releasing the unnecessary, he gained clarity. By forgiving himself and others, he gained peace. By embracing the present moment, he gained life itself. As Hiroshi stood on a hill overlooking the vast horizon, he felt a deep sense of freedom wash over him. The chains that had once bound him were gone, and his heart was as light as the leaf he had once admired. In the next part of this journey, we will explore the practical steps Hiroshi took to integrate these lessons into his daily life, how he built habits of mindfulness, gratitude, and simplicity, and how he helped others on their own paths to letting go. As Hiroshi continued his journey, he realized that letting go was not merely an abstract philosophy but a way of living, a practice that required daily commitment and conscious effort. It was not enough to understand the idea of letting go. One had to embody it in every aspect of life. With each passing day, Hiroshi began to integrate the lessons he had learned from Master Hotaka into his routines, his thoughts, and his interactions with others. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and rice fields, Hiroshi met an elderly woman named Aiko. She ran a small tea shop where visitors would sit by the window, sip tea, and watch the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Despite her peaceful demeanor, Hiroshi noticed a lingering sadness in her eyes. One evening, as they shared a pot of green tea, Aiko revealed her story. She had lost her son many years ago in an accident. Since then, she had kept his room exactly as he had left it, every object untouched, every memory preserved in glass. "It feels like letting go of his room would mean letting go of him," Aiko said softly, her voice trembling. Hiroshi nodded, understanding the weight of her grief. "Sometimes," he said gently, "we hold on to things because we believe they keep our loved ones close. But in truth, love isn't confined to objects or spaces. It lives in our hearts, in our memories, and in the quiet moments when we feel their presence without needing to see or touch anything." With Hiroshi's encouragement, Aiko began the slow process of letting go. She didn't rush. She moved at her own pace. Together, they cleaned the room, keeping a few cherished mementos and donating the rest to families in need. When the room was finally empty, Aiko stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of loss, but of release. This experience reinforced Hiroshi's understanding. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It means honoring what was, accepting what is, and creating space for what could be. But letting go isn't always about objects or past memories. Sometimes it is about releasing identities, labels, and roles we have imposed on ourselves. In another village, Hiroshi met a man named Daiki, a former soldier who carried the weight of his past actions like an invisible armor. "I cannot forgive myself," Daiki confessed one night as they sat under a sky full of stars. "The things I have done, they haunt me." Hiroshi listened without judgment. "Daiki, every day you carry this burden. You punish yourself. But punishment does not bring redemption. Forgiveness does." Daiki shook his head. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Hiroshi placed a hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness is not about deserving. It is about releasing yourself from a prison of your own making. You cannot change the past, but you can choose how you live now. With Hiroshi's guidance, Daiki began to find ways to forgive himself. He started volunteering in the village, helping rebuild homes and teaching children how to read. Slowly, the armor he had built around his heart began to crack, and light started to seep through. Letting go, Hiroshi realized, was often intertwined with forgiveness. Forgiveness of others and, most importantly, forgiveness of oneself. But as Hiroshi traveled, he also encountered resistance. There were those who clung so tightly to their pain, their anger, or their fears that they could not imagine a life without them. One such person was a merchant named Yuri, who had been betrayed by his closest friend in a business deal. "I will never forgive him," Yuri said bitterly. "He ruined me. Why should I let go of this anger when it fuels me every day?" Hiroshi replied, "Anger is like holding a burning coal, Yuri. You may intend to throw it at someone else, but in the end, it is your hand that gets burned." Yuri fell silent, the weight of Hiroshi's words sinking in. Over time, he began to understand that his anger was not punishing his betrayer. It was punishing himself. With great effort, Yuri started to release his grip on the past, and with each step, his burden grew lighter. Through these encounters, Hiroshi began to see patterns. Whether it was grief, guilt, anger, or fear, every attachment had one thing in common. It kept people trapped in the past or paralyzed by the future. True freedom could only be found in the present moment, a moment unburdened by unnecessary weight. To deepen his practice, Hiroshi began spending more time in meditation. He would sit by rivers, under trees, or on quiet hilltops, allowing his thoughts to rise and fall like waves on the ocean. He learned to observe his attachments without judgment, to acknowledge them without clinging to them. One day, while meditating by a quiet stream, Hiroshi had a profound realization. Letting go was not about forcing oneself to forget or suppress feelings. It was about accepting them, feeling them fully, and then allowing them to pass naturally, like leaves floating downstream. But letting go is not always a solitary act. Hiroshi also learned the importance of community, of sharing our burdens, our fears, and our hopes with others. In a bustling town square, he met a group of villagers who gathered every week to share stories, laugh together, and support one another. Sometimes, an elderly villager told Hiroshi, "We carry burdens that are too heavy to bear alone, but when we share them with others, they become lighter." Hiroshi saw the truth in these words. While solitude offered clarity, connection offered strength. The two were not opposites but complements. As his journey continued, Hiroshi began teaching others what he had learned. He led small groups in meditation, helped families declutter their homes, and shared stories of letting go with anyone who would listen. His lessons were simple but profound. Embrace impermanence, practice forgiveness, and live fully in the present. One evening, as the sun set behind distant mountains, Hiroshi sat quietly by a campfire. The flickering flames danced in the cool night air, and he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He realized that letting go was not a destination but a journey, a daily practice of release, acceptance, and gratitude. In the next part of this journey, we will explore how Hiroshi helped others integrate the art of letting go into their lives through mindfulness, gratitude, and the conscious cultivation of inner peace. As Hiroshi ventured further along his journey, he began to notice how deeply the practice of letting go transformed not just his inner world, but also his interactions with others. The wisdom he had gathered from his encounters with Aiko, Daiki, and Yuri now guided him as he crossed paths with more people burdened by their own attachments. Each interaction became a mirror, reflecting lessons Hiroshi himself was still learning. In a bustling marketplace, Hiroshi met a young woman named Emi. She was a talented artist, her paintings filled with vibrant colors and raw emotion. Yet, despite her talent, Emi felt trapped. "Every time I pick up a brush," she confessed to Hiroshi, "I hear the voices of critics in my mind. I fear that whatever I create will never be good enough." Hiroshi observed Emi at work. Her brush hesitated on the canvas, her hand trembling with uncertainty. "Emi," Hiroshi said softly, "you are holding on to perfection as if it were a shield, but it has become a cage. True art is not about pleasing others. It is about expressing yourself freely." He encouraged Emi to close her eyes, breathe deeply, and paint without thinking. Slowly, Emmy began to move her brush across the canvas, her strokes becoming bolder, her colors more vibrant. When she finally opened her eyes, she gasped. The painting before her was not perfect, but it was alive, a raw, honest reflection of her emotions. Emmy's story reminded Hiroshi of an essential truth. Letting go is not always about releasing tangible things. Sometimes it is about releasing expectations, the rigid standards we impose on ourselves that keep us paralyzed by fear. But Hiroshi's journey also brought him face to face with another profound lesson: the importance of letting go of relationships that no longer served growth. In a quiet village, he met an elderly man named Kazuya, who had spent decades holding on to resentment towards his brother over a long-forgotten argument. "We haven't spoken in 30 years, Kazuya admitted, his voice filled with both anger and sadness. "But every day, I replay our argument in my mind. It's like a shadow I cannot escape." Hiroshi listened patiently before asking, "If your brother stood before you now, what would you say to him?" Kazuya's eyes welled with tears. "I would tell him I miss him. I would tell him I'm sorry." Hiroshi placed a hand on Kazuya's shoulder. "Then say those words, Kazuya. Whether he hears them or not, release them from your heart. Resentment is a poison we drink, hoping it will harm someone else, but it only harms us." That evening, Kazuya wrote a letter to his brother. He poured his heart onto the pages, expressing his regrets, his love, and his longing for reconciliation. When the letter was finished, Kazuya burned it, watching as the smoke carried his words into the sky. The next morning, Hiroshi noticed a lightness in Kazuya's step, as though a weight he had carried for decades had finally been lifted. Letting go of relationships, Hiroshi realized, is one of the most challenging yet liberating acts of all. It does not always mean cutting ties, but rather releasing the emotional baggage attached to those ties. Yet, Hiroshi also encountered moments when letting go was not about releasing the past but about embracing change. In a coastal town battered by storms, he met a fisherman named Ryo who refused to leave his crumbling home despite the danger. "This house has been in my family for generations," Ryo said stubbornly. "I cannot abandon it." Hiroshi looked at the cracks in the walls and the way the sea threatened to reclaim the land. "Ryo," he said gently, "this house has served your family well, but clinging to it now endangers your life. Sometimes, letting go is not about losing something but about choosing to live." After much reflection, Ryo made the difficult decision to leave his ancestral home and rebuild on safer ground. Though it was painful, Ryo later admitted that the move had given him not only safety but also a sense of renewal. Through these experiences, Hiroshi began to understand that letting go is not a single act but a practice that must be revisited time and time again. It requires courage to confront what we are holding onto and clarity to recognize when it is time to release. Hiroshi also discovered that letting go often requires rituals, symbolic acts that help bridge the gap between intention and action. He began teaching others small practices they could incorporate into their lives. For some, it was writing letters they would never send. For others, it was lighting candles and offering prayers of release. And for many, it was simply sitting quietly by a river, watching leaves drift downstream and imagining their burdens being carried away by the current. But letting go is not always about release. It is also about making space. As Hiroshi walked through a quiet forest one autumn afternoon, he observed the trees shedding their leaves. There was no struggle, no resistance. The leaves simply let go, trusting that spring would bring new growth. Nature does not cling, Hiroshi thought to himself. It trusts the cycles of life. This realization deepened his understanding. Letting go is not an end. It is a beginning. When we release what no longer serves us, we create space for something new to grow, whether it is peace, love, or clarity. In every village, every town, and every quiet corner of his journey, Hiroshi shared these lessons. He met people from all walks of life, artists, farmers, merchants, and wanderers, and each person carried their own burden, their own story, their own attachment. But Hiroshi never judged. He listened, he shared, and he guided them with gentle words and compassionate presence. As the seasons changed and the air grew cooler, Hiroshi found himself returning to the same hill where his journey had begun. He sat under a tree, feeling the weightlessness in his chest and the clarity in his mind. Letting go, he realized, was not a destination but a way of being. It was a dance between holding on and releasing, between presence and impermanence. In the final part of our journey, we will explore how Hiroshi brought his lessons together, how he integrated the art of letting go into his daily life and shared it with a world desperately in need of peace. As Hiroshi approached the final chapter of his journey, he found himself returning to the monastery where his path had first begun. The familiar scent of incense hung in the air, and the quiet hum of chanting monks reverberated through the stone corridors. Yet, Hiroshi was no longer the same person who had first arrived here, burdened by invisible weights he couldn't quite name. He had walked through villages, spoken with strangers who became teachers, and faced his own shadows in the stillness of solitude. Master Hotaka greeted Hiroshi with a serene smile. "You have returned, my friend," the old monk said softly. "Tell me, what have you discovered on your journey?" Hiroshi bowed deeply. "Master, I have learned that letting go is not a single act, but a lifelong practice. It is the gentle untying of knots we didn't know we had, the release of burdens we didn't realize we were carrying. It is not about rejection, but about acceptance." Master Hotaka nodded approvingly and gestured for Hiroshi to follow him to the temple garden. Together, they walked in silence, their steps in harmony with the gentle rustle of leaves. "Hiroshi," Hotaka said finally, "letting go is not the same as giving up. It is not weakness, nor is it passivity. It is the courage to trust the natural flow of life, to surrender to impermanence, and to allow space for new beginnings." Hiroshi reflected on the many people he had met along his journey: Aiko, Daiki, Emi, Kanzuya, and Ryo. Each of them had shown him a different face of attachment and a unique path to release. Through their stories, Hiroshi had realized that everyone carries their own burdens, their own knots waiting to be untangled. Over the following weeks, Hiroshi stayed at the monastery, sharing his insights with young monks and visitors who came seeking peace. He spoke of the dangers of clinging to material possessions, the pain of unresolved regret, the illusion of control, and the subtle chains of seeking validation from others. One afternoon, a young monk named Taro approached Hiroshi with a troubled expression. "Master Hiroshi, I feel trapped by my own expectations. I want to be perfect in my practice, in my duties, in everything. But the more I try, the more I feel like I am failing." Hiroshi smiled gently. "Taro, perfection is a mirage. It keeps us chasing something that does not exist. Instead of striving to be perfect, strive to be present. When you pour tea, pour tea. When you sweep the floor, sweep the floor. When you breathe, just breathe." Taro nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing as if a weight had been lifted. Hiroshi had learned this lesson himself many times over. That presence, not perfection, was the path to true peace. But Hiroshi also knew that letting go was not just an internal practice. It required action. It required courage to walk away from toxic relationships, to release old identities, and to step into the unknown with trust. One day, Hiroshi visited a nearby village and met a woman named Keiko, who was struggling with a difficult decision. She had been offered an opportunity to leave her hometown and start a new life in a distant city, but she was afraid of leaving behind everything familiar. "What if I fail?" Keiko asked, her voice trembling. Hiroshi took a deep breath and replied, "Keiko, every step forward carries the possibility of failure, but it also carries the possibility of growth. Sometimes, we must let go of the shore to discover the vastness of the ocean." With Hiroshi's encouragement, Keiko made the brave decision to take the opportunity. She wrote him a letter months later, describing her new life filled with challenges, but also with joy, discovery, and renewal. Letting go, Hiroshi realized, was not always gentle or easy. Sometimes, it required us to step into discomfort, to face uncertainty, and to trust the invisible threads of life to guide us forward. But Hiroshi also learned that letting go wasn't about abandoning everything. Some things are worth holding on to, like love, like kindness, like the quiet moments of connection that remind us of our shared humanity. During his final days at the monastery, Hiroshi spent hours meditating under the ancient Bodhi tree in the temple courtyard. He let the lessons of his journey settle into his bones, like seeds planted in fertile soil. He realized that letting go was not the end of the path but the beginning of a new way of being. On the morning of his departure, Master Hotaka presented Hiroshi with a small wooden carving of a bird in flight. "Take this with you, Hiroshi," Hotaka said. "May it remind you that letting go is not falling. It is learning to fly." Hiroshi accepted the gift with deep gratitude, holding it close to his chest. As he walked down the mountain path, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of his regrets, fears, and attachments had been replaced with something far more valuable: freedom. Hiroshi returned to the world not as someone who had escaped it, but as someone who had learned to live within it more mindfully. He began teaching others, sharing the wisdom he had gathered on his journey. In community halls, in quiet corners of busy cities, and under the open sky, Hiroshi spoke of the art of letting go. He taught people how to recognize their attachments, how to release them with compassion, and how to create space in their hearts and minds for joy, gratitude, and peace. His words touched the lives of many, and his presence became a gentle reminder that true freedom lies not in acquiring more, but in carrying less. As the sun set on another day, Hiroshi sat quietly by a riverbank, watching the water flow past him. The ripples carried leaves downstream, each one a symbol of something released, something surrendered. Life, Hiroshi whispered to himself, is not about holding on. It is about knowing when to let go. And with that, Hiroshi closed his eyes, breathing in the cool evening air, at peace with himself and the world around him. This journey, though deeply personal, is one that we all share. The art of letting go is not reserved for sages or monks. It is a path open to anyone willing to walk it. May we all find the courage to release what weighs us down, to trust the flow of life, and to embrace the freedom that comes from living lightly.